What is interesting is that we don't just have the United States or on its own, or Europe on its own, or you know, the EU, and you have you have the United States, you have the EU, and the tentacles are extended into Australia and New Zealand, and and Japan is part of the whole system. And their project has been over the years to dominate the financial systems of the world, dominate the finance of the world, dominate the trade of the world through the WTO, whose rules they write for us. And at the same time, if things go really wrong, they have the military power of NATO. And so the United States, the European Union, and by extension, Australia and Canada and Japan, they have, and more they are drawing in Eastern Europe, and they have these different tools they use. So at that level, we have to understand that what we're dealing with. We can be crippled just by the control of the financial system. Here in the Caribbean, we have our banks, our small banks, have been running the risk of being of sanctions by the OECD countries, by these larger countries, because if they feel that we are not in compliance with this or that, you know. And so this is the stranglehold they have over us. So it now means that we of the global south have to find these tools, especially in terms of trade and production and and finance matters. We have to find that. We have to find our way through the maze of these things, but I do not think it is something that is impossible.
Yes, again, you got to go back to the organization because Marcus Garvey, he was born at a time that, okay, we could say that there were other people that they could learn from, but there was no really very solid organization that had been set up. No, people are just free from slavery, but so the people's mind are so messed up that some people will even prefer to remain there in the situation that they were, because now you are free, okay, but you are free. What are the instruments that you have to be able to compete in the world? So it was a really complicated situation, but in that situation, he managed to rise up and organize what he organized. I think that is extraordinary. So comparing that to the situation that we have today, I think we have more chances of being able to organize ourselves. So yes, I believe you. It's possible. But how do we do it?
This is something that is going to take um, not just a lot of thought, a lot of interaction, and as I say, it is going to take a certain amount of internationalism, um, because we have to reach across borders, especially those of us um, who we now describe as those of us in the global south. We have to reach across borders, across cultures, across race. We have to reach across that and and build something from the ground up, because the edifice that we face is a very complex edifice. That edifice sees us as an entity to be suppressed, an entity from which to extract wealth, and any movement in the direction of claiming or reclaiming our wealth, they look at this as a threat to their further accumulation of wealth. So our heads would, to use a colloquial term, our heads would definitely have to be put together, but we have to reach across the boundaries of the nation state. We have to reach across the boundaries of the several countries and geographical areas throughout which we have been flung. We have to reach even out across just the confines of just Africa. It has to be, we have to reach across the question of the oppressed peoples, even of other races.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, looking at the challenges, what would you say was the challenges that Marcus Garvey would have had in his time, so that we see that he managed to overcome many of them. Of course, not all of them, because you are a human being, you cannot overcome all the challenges, so that we can learn from him. Because, like I said, he's a great individual that we should learn from. So, but what do you see to be his challenges or the biggest challenges at the time?
One of the biggest challenges at the time for Marcus Garvey, in the Caribbean, that is, was the fact that he was operating within the colonial context of the British Empire. And in that colonial context, the broad masses of the people did not have the political and democratic participation that would be necessary for them to take hold of their own destinies. They did not have that. They would have to fight for it. So that was one of the impediments. That was an impediment that we saw later on, especially in the 1930s and 40s. There was an attempt to deal with, and to a very significant extent, we were able to do it, and we were able to achieve reforms within the system of government, right? Within the system of democracy. But even now, that system is still very circumscribed by the fact that outside of our borders, there are these overarching powers, which, of course, feel that we cannot operate on our own. We are just areas for them to extract wealth from, and so we have to be kept in check. So that is one of the impediments that Garvey faced, an impediment that we still have today, albeit in a different and perhaps in a more pervasive way. So we still have to deal with this. The other impediment is whether, of course, our organizations are equipped from the standpoint of the way we do things to really deal with this. This was one of the issues where Marcus Garvey's UNIA as an organization, this is one of the things that affected it. So whereas Marcus Garvey's mobilizational skills spread across the Caribbean, into Central America, into North America, whereas he reached out to the diaspora around the world, mobilizing, right? Organizing even, but I don't think enough attention was paid to how that organization continued to relate to the challenges of the time. And that is one of the areas that I think in our various countries, in the diaspora across the world, at the level of the various political organizations of activism, our universities, our institutions of learning, our systems of trade, our systems of finance. I think all of that, it is within these areas. Again, we say it is very complex, but it is within these areas that we have to that we have to focus, or else we are missing the point.